Welcome back, traders and investors, to Benzinga's pre-market prep, brought to you by MarketFi. I'm your co-host, Joel Elconin, along with Brianna Valesky. And we have two special guests on the line. We have Angie Maguire. She is the Vice President of Grain for Citizens Elevator, known as Twitter as the Goddess of Grain. And we have Karl Setzer on the line. He's a grain market analyst at MaxYield Grain. How you guys doing this morning?
Great. How are you?
We're doing good. So, every Saturday I religiously read my Barron's here, and I read the Commodities Corner. And, boy, they came out and made a very bullish call on wheat here. And, they did talk technicals like I like to do a lot, but they talked about some serious fundamentals here. And I'm just looking for a wheat chart, and I can't find one. Let's just, I'll pull up the corn while we talk about this. But, did you see the article, and what's your take on it, Angie?
I did not see the article, but I am not I'm not one to argue with the bullish side of fundamentals when it comes to wheat. I myself, just a couple of days, well, probably a week or so ago, I fully anticipate a rally to take place in new crop wheat as we move ahead. And I've had a lot of wheat traders who think I'm crazy, just because, when you look at the global numbers right now from an old crop standpoint, we have a pretty significant amount of wheat on hand, and we'll have a very significant amount of wheat left over. Last year was a pretty solid bumper crop of wheat globally. The United States, we suffered a little bit due to some conditions and things of that nature there last spring. But from a global standpoint, we had a huge amount of wheat. But the last time we had a similar amount of carryout, we came into the next year with cheap wheat, ran into a couple production issues, and basically saw our global carryout numbers drop, like 30 million metric tons, or 30 million metric tons. So we saw the carryout number drop pretty hard real quick, and or 30 metric ton, excuse me, but it's a significant amount. So to me, when I look at it and we see what's going on with the drought in the southern plains, and we see the continuation of heavy rainfall in the Delta area, and then we see some concerns with quality out of or conditions in Russia and Ukraine, we really got to be aware that every day we're making more people and subsequently more wheat demand. And really we could be one crop issue away from going from hugely burdensome stocks to tight stocks. And that's just one of the weird things with wheat is every day we're harvesting it seems like globally. But it doesn't take much to really cause an issue with supply, versus the demand that we have.
And Karl, what's your take on the supply and demand in wheat? Are you as bullish?
Well, I'm going to admit here, Angie's the expert on wheat when it comes to us too. But I am friendly to wheat. I look at it, and we're trading the May right around 510. July wheat trading around that 512 as we speak here, down a little bit here this morning. But I go back and you go backwards to look forwards, and I'm looking at the stocks to use on U.S. wheat. Everybody's talking these, the huge stocks in March. The USDA put them out 691 million bushels, a little bit bigger than what we've seen here recently, but with a 33.1% stocks to use, the USDA is projecting a farm price right around that $6 mark. We go back in history, 2012-13. We had ending stocks 718 million bushels, with a ratio of basically 30%. And we were looking at, $7.70 wheat. And there times were a little different then, but you go back through and even before that, it appears to me as though wheat is undervalued from a stocks to use. Granted, we do have large stocks right now, but we do have the production issues out in the plains right now that's keeping some risk premium in there. And, I can easily see wheat climb, at least another 50, 75 cents here pretty easy.
Okay, they were looking for a much bigger move than that, I think, in Barron's. But let's go to other grains here. And correct me if I'm wrong. I thought the complex kind of moved together. I'm looking at corn futures, and Karl, I'm going to go to you on this one. What happened? It looks like on Monday, yesterday. What happened in corn there?
Well, we came out with, the big one that shot corn. I think the knee-jerk reaction was the acres. Average estimate by trade, we're coming out 88.7 for intentions. Actually came out 89.2. We weren't very far off from the Ag Forum in February at an even 89. So we got a few more acres there, down 2% on the year, but still quite a bit. But we got to look at the stocks on corn. Trade estimate that 7.6 billion bushels came out at 7.74. Up, almost 750 million bushels on the year, and I think that shock marked the market to begin with. But we got to look at how much of that's being held on farm, and there's just a tremendous amount of corn out there, and I think that the market just needed to sell off, regroup a little bit, get your weak longs out of there, and now we'll see if we can start to grind this back higher a little bit.
Angie, I want to go to you. I mean, it looked like corn bottomed here in October and had a nice rally. It looked like the 4.25 a bushel. We pulled back now. I like to look at like 50% retracements here after a long-term downtrend here in corn. You think might be a time to maybe step back in? He looks like someone's not letting this thing go below $3 here. What's your take on corn?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think when you look at your front month on the May there, or just a continuous front month sort of chart, I think we've entered into basically the new range. I think in October we overdid it, pretty substantially to the downside. I think we touched a 320 on the Ds at the time, or right around that level before we started to come back. And, we rallied up to that 415, 417 on the front, and then we fell back after the January report, which was relatively similar. I mean, that's the thing. When it comes down to it with the market, the stocks numbers that we look at are pretty imperative because they basically give us an indication of whether or not we're on track from a supply or a demand standpoint. And yesterday, with a higher stock number than expected, it kind of indicates that we have a little bit more. So basically we retested, like Karl said, retested the low end of things. I'd really like to make sure that we hold a 373, 375 range here today. And if we can and can get a relatively decent pop back up towards that 382 mark or so, I think I wouldn't be the least bit surprised to see us retest old highs over the next month. To me, yesterday's report didn't do much damage to the whole fundamental outlook. It may have taken the top end off. But I think the fact that everyone was going into the report leaning so bullish, I mean, they were anticipating bullish numbers from this corn report, basically since last Christmas. We've been talking about how bullish the March 31st report would be for corn. The fact that it wasn't, I think, was more of a surprise than the actual numbers themselves.
Okay, Karl, I'm going to go to you now. Boy, oh boy, the weather. It looked like we had 1 day of spring a couple weeks ago, and then, we had snow just a couple days ago. It was freezing yesterday, supposed to be 70 on Thursday. I mean, is this just wreaking havoc on the farmers, or, can they wait to get that crop in the ground?
Well, we're holding up here a little bit, but it's getting a little bit, we're starting to get a little more nervous here. The thing we got to look at, Joel, is, we're not to the insurance date yet to put crops in. So most farmers are not excited yet. Give us 7 days. We get till next Wednesday, and if guys can't get in the fields, we're going to be a little bit more nervous. Out here in Iowa, this morning on the way into the office, I did see some guys out doing some tillage work. We've been running with the agronomy, putting the chemicals and the fertilizer down, so we are prepared. The thing with the market right now, with weather on a whole, trade is not excited about it. We have very little risk premium in this market on the deferreds, and I think if we see conditions persist, give us another, 2-3 weeks here, we start to get into the 20th of April, and we're not seeing much activity. That is when I think we'll see the market react a little bit more. As of right now, as long as we keep seeing these long-range forecasts calling for mostly benign conditions, we're just not going to see too much excitement, I don't think.
Angie, what's on your weather radar?
Right now, it's early. Here up in Michigan, we don't usually get too shook up about things until basically last week of April is when you'll see people really start running here, because we tend to get that late April snowstorm just about every year. So no one's ever really in a real big hurry to move until you get to the last part. But what I'm really watching is the Delta weather, the southern weather that we have going on. We have a very big case or a very big developing issue of haves and have-nots. I mean, you look at the Northern Plains, Dakotas, parts of Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and parts of western Texas there. They're very, 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 very dry. And then you go to the eastern Corn Belt, and where we're really looking at issues is the Texas, the eastern Texas area, into Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Mississippi, those states right there. They haven't really gotten a break. And, I know Karl and I have discussed, Louisiana's, basically they don't bring a huge amount of production to the table when it comes compared to what happens in the heart of the Corn Belt. But the fact that they typically see, over half of their corn crop planted by this point in time, by April 1st, and they're only about 1 to 5% planted, I mean, I think that could be an issue. Now, if you start to see that creep north, where we should be seeing planters rolling by mid-April, into the northern Corn Belt, eastern Corn Belt states, southern Illinois, southern Indiana, Ohio, things like that, over the next couple weeks, they're anticipating some pretty heavy rainfall. Right now, rain is bearish. The corn market, rain makes grain is always the sentiment until it delays plantings, basically. But the fact that we're real dry on the western side of things is probably going to be a decent little weather tug of war here for a while. But it'll all come way more into, the focus of the market here probably over the next couple weeks.
Okay, and just one final question for both of you, you'll have to give me an update on net exporters or net importers, for the U.S. grains. But what about the dollar? I mean, it's a strong dollar, going to have a net lasting negative effect on corn and oil, at least for exporting purposes.
Oh yeah, and I'll let Karl go into detail if he wants after, but that's really what we've been experiencing a lot with wheat in particular. Wheat, even soybeans to a lesser effect, but corn. Our imports at this point in time, I think our sales are something like 8% behind a year ago. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that due to a strong dollar, our supplies, our export offers are far more expensive than some of our cheaper competitors there.
Okay, Karl, any thoughts on the dollar and its effect on the grain markets?
I think one thing we have to watch right now, we did see a little bit of a bump in soybean movement out of South America yesterday. Could be from, the dollar finally starting to impact their market, but also from the fact they're advancing in their harvest and yields are pretty good, so they've got some movement. One thing I think we need to watch is the dollar doesn't just affect imports like we're saying, it affects imports just as well. So I want to see if, that could keep our fertilizer up, could limit the expansion we'd see in South America, and, indirectly to corn. Our ethanol is starting to struggle a little bit with our exports. We'll get a report here this morning a little bit, but to see if that's starting to weigh on our end product sales more so than the actual corn and soybeans and wheat.
Okay, we've been on the line with Angie Maguire, the goddess of grain. She's vice president of grain for Citizens Elevators. I think we got to make up a name for Karl.
Karl's good, Joel. Karl's good.
How about King of Corn?
That works.
whatever you guys want.
We'll get him a crown.
Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. Very good insight on the grain markets. We hope to speak to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joel.